emails were sent to all of Poilievre's shadow cabinet from his office, basically asking them to justify their existences.
Got some stuff going on here today. Welcome back to Moose on Loose. My name's David. Today we've got Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives rolling out new ads, testing the new message here after going on Diary of a CEO and Joe Rogan, etc., as well as going down to America, meeting with business leaders. We've got the by-elections coming up. Donald Trump just pulled the boogeyman card from the Liberals and Mark Carney, and no more 51st state talk. As long as that stands, this is really churning things up for the by-elections next week. Let's jump into this. Starting this episode off, some pretty ugly polling data, but it's time to start looking at this again. So we've got the Liberals at 46% on this Nanos poll and 31% for the Conservatives, NDP at 13, so +7. We're seeing the Avi Lewis effect kicking in here. This is sample size only 1,000 people, so not very big sample size. And how Nick Nanos does his, he rolls in 250 people, new people into his polls, and then kicks out the oldest 250 people. You're not seeing a fresh batch of people. Right away, there's a dumb comment here. Pierre's only in it for Stornoway at this point. You just can't reason with these kind of people. Mark Carney is quite literally rolling out his net zero agenda that he's going to be making upwards over $1 billion from. We have Clay Thompson saying that Poilievre's in it for Stornoway. Unbelievably clueless. Moving ahead, we've got the food professor with this, showing the past 12 months in Canada with food inflation. We've got cucumbers 43%, whole chicken 42%, celeries +36%, coffee 25%, beef 24%, strawberries 22%, all the way down here. Everything is going up. You can't get away from it. You can't change your diet and eat the cheaper foods. There's really nothing cheaper. Everything is going up. So sad. I mean, even just going for a run today, I saw some guys hanging out the train station, plugging in some stuff. Clearly they're homeless, but they're not the typical homeless people. They look like the people who work. They just have nowhere to live. So they're charging their phone at a plug at the train station. And actually, I've got a wild story of a guy who I ran into, told me that he has a business that does over $1 million a year in construction materials, and he chooses to not run the business because the taxes are so high in Canada. He'd rather just work in the oil patch for a couple weeks here and there versus running his construction materials company and get taxed out the wazoo 40 some odd percent. This is Canada, where people would rather not have $1 million business because taxes are so high. And as you're going to see throughout this episode, when you have food that's really high and low prosperity, Canadians start going down to America. Before we get to that, we've got the Terrebonne riding predictions here coming from Sharia Teest. He's setting it at 40% for the Liberals and 38% for the Bloc, 14% for the Conservatives. We really need the Conservatives to go vote for the Bloc. If you're in the Terrebonne riding and you're Conservative, vote for the Bloc. We need Carney to not have this seat. I think the Liberals, they know this. They know that they need this one extra seat just to make it a little bit more cushy. And that's why we're hearing this talks of 10 more floor crossers, because Carney doesn't like the one seat majority. He needs more, and he doesn't want to do another campaign because he's lazy. He just wants to watch sports games and get rich. So they're desperately trying. Their other plan here is getting 10 more people. Now, likely they're not going to get 10, but if they got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, they'd have a more comfortable majority government. So we really need to stick it to them right here. So if you're a Conservative, vote for the Bloc in this by-election. The Liberals can't win this. Moving ahead, we've got Ottawa minister recuses himself from Ottawa's high-speed rail project. So I brought this up in a previous video. Francois Philippe Champagne's wife works as the vice president of environment for Alto, a crown corporation. It's directly basically tied with Champagne here, a direct conflict of interest, raging conflict of interest. We got Michael Barrett posting this. The finance minister claims he recused himself, but the ethics commissioner seems to have no record of it. We need to get to the bottom of this. What do you know? It's more liberal lies. We got Conservative Denise Batters breaking this down. It says, Carney's Liberal Finance Minister Champagne put this high-speed rail initiative, Alto, into his own Budget Implementation Act. This Bill C-15 only passed 2 weeks ago. In making this sneaky move, Champagne ensured that 90 billion boondoggle to be and his personal connection would receive less scrutiny and faster passage. Of course it did. These guys are so rotten to the core. It's funny, Embrandt saying, I stepped away for a few hours, missed another Liberal scandal. I mean, that's how many there are here. A Liberal feeding at the trough again? Say it ain't so. This is what they have to say on the CBC regarding this project. They bring on this pundit to attack Pierre Poilievre, not wanting to support this $90 billion, which we know will go up to $150 or $200 billion project that will bankrupt Canada.
Well, first of all, it's quite ironic that he's now the king of NIMBYism and has no concern whatsoever about all these pipelines that don't even have proponents behind it and just expropriating land and doing whatever you want. So beyond that hypocrisy, These are thousands of jobs, and this is about building and putting people to work.
We talk about hypocrisy. Champagne's wife is literally one of the people overseeing this expropriation, the land grab for this Alto project that's going to SNC-Lavalin, renamed to Atkin Realis, the former company charged with fraud, paying millions of dollars to get dirty contracts, all tied to the Liberal government. This is more corruption.
The only G7 country, if not the only OECD country that doesn't have a high-speed rail. Right? This is about fueling the economy.
That's a dumb reason to decide to have high-speed rail or not. It's based on population and whether the numbers work. And that's why the private sector hasn't done it, because the numbers don't work. Our population is not high enough. Our country is so big. Looking at the estimates, CD Howe projected we're going to make around $15 billion off this high-speed rail. And if it costs us $90 billion, that puts us in a huge deficit. And we know full well this won't be $90 billion. It'll be $150. It'll be $200 billion. You know what the high-speed rail in California is currently projected at right now? So this talks about the high-speed rail from San Francisco to Los Angeles. It was originally in 2008 estimated price was $33 billion. And today it's now $126 billion, as in 4 times the price. So if the Liberals are saying $90 billion, was it going to cost us $360 billion? $300 billion? $200, $250? It's not going to be 90. Now jumping back over to X here, we've got Rick Perkins commented on my post here talking about Francois Philippe Champagne's wife being in Alto, and he says he introduced the budget and spending estimates and voted for them when the estimates allocated $597 million alone this year to Alto, directly where his partner is an executive. This is one of the biggest ethical breaches so far in 11 years of Liberals. And of course, nothing will happen from this because the Liberals are so corrupt, they don't even obey the law. And we know this because it was found unconstitutional for violating the Charter of Rights with the Freedom Convoy. Were they charged? Was anyone prosecuted, put in prison? No. Canada's a gong show, so who will hold him accountable? Seems like Liberal corruption is an acceptable thing these days. Yep, there is no accountability. They can get away with anything. Never go to prison, never get fined. Melissa posting this: how can Finance Minister Champagne say Canada is the second fastest growing economy in the G7 when almost every other report shows that only Canada's economy contracted and has been deteriorating for at least a year? It's just more lies.
So with our colleagues in the G7 earlier this week, and it's clear that the fiscal position of Canada is widely regarded as one of the most solid in the G7. Let's remind ourselves that Canada is the second fastest growing economy in the G7.
He should be fined $15,000 for saying that. Every time any minister, the prime minister, outright lies in public media like this, $15,000, just boom, done. These guys would have to stop lying or they'd go bankrupt. They have a lot of money, but they lie even more. They would go bankrupt pretty quick. We've got the Reclamaire posting this: debt servicing is the second largest line item in the budget forecast to 2029. Cost of borrowing, health programs, personal tax transfers, capital funding. Canada is not thriving. We got Kirk Lubomov posting this: China has now more debt than the European Union as they're borrowing to scale. The US has more debt than China and the EU combined. Who's buying all the debt? Something has to give. It's an interesting point here. It's a whole lot of debt. That's what we basically see with everything. America and China are continually competing, and China is finding the back doors to get into Canada to get access to our critical minerals, to our oil infrastructure, anything that's important that they can use against America, they can use to boost themselves and try to catch America. I mean, that's what this is. It's number one and number two. These two countries battling it out. And we should be on the side of America, not China. We got Table Salt posting this: there are now estimates 1.1 million Canadian professionals living in the United States, 40% of which are top 1% earners, 3 times higher than any other country. And Canada is now bleeding 65,000 pros every year, a 50-year high. This is what the Liberals have done. They are bankrupting our country. With the highest earners, we're talking incredibly smart people who would be paying a ton of tax. They've gone down to America. Jumping over to a panel on CTV, let's just cue it up with this. We've got Poilievre adopts less combative tone in new conservative ad campaign. So this is what they're talking about on this panel here. Couple new ads coming out today.
History will not judge us by the disruptions we faced, but by how we responded, by whether we surrendered to events or mastered what lay within our power. By a country that stands on its own feet, is master in its own home, that bows before no nation, a country that is unbreakable. My friends, my ambition, and I believe the ambition of all Canadians, is for Canada to be that country.
Okay, before we start this discussion, or as we started, I should say, we want to show some of the second ad. It starts in 2015 in a grocery store, and a mother is shopping for groceries with her daughter. We'll roll some of that video now, so you continue to see some of the news stories about the affordability crisis. And then later in the commercial, it rejoins the pair in that same store in 2026. The ad ends with the mom telling her daughter that they can't afford the item that they once did 11 years ago. And of course, it blames the Liberal Party of Canada for that. Okay, let's start the discussion on this, Lisa. It's really a tale of two commercials here, one that underlines the issues of everyday Canadians, and the other one, which is putting Pierre Poilievre at the center of it. Which of these do you think will punch through?
That is a really good question. I'm going to say that I like the one that is focused on people, because actually the two of them probably are going to go together. So if you look at the first one of the people talking about affordability, they are showing the problem, defining the problem, indicating that there is a problem, acknowledging that you're suffering, that you're struggling out there. And then the other one is meant to come in and say, but this is the guy who understands where you're coming from and is going to help fix the problems. And it's always against not necessarily a person. He's really pivoted away from necessarily blaming the Liberals for absolutely everything, just by going along the lines of, well, this is the system. The system is against you, and I'm going to break down the system for you.
We know full well the Liberals are going to blame Donald Trump for this, or Netanyahu, the Ayatollah, Ronald McDonald. They'll blame anyone but themselves for the problems that majority of this is caused by them. Sure, food inflation is now going to be spiking starting soon because of what's going on in Iran and the price of oil. But I mean, this is a homegrown problem here. Now, the question is how many Canadians get it? There's a lot of propaganda in our country and a lot of uninformed people who have no idea what's going on.
So, Brian, I think a lot of people, to Lisa's point, have sort of looked at Pierre almost as the chief sort of, I don't want to say complainer in chief, but certainly the person who has been blaming the Liberals for a lot. Trying to look as a...
I mean, even that statement there, complainer in chief, I don't want to say complainer in chief. Well, you just said it and people heard it. And now you're calling Poilievre a complainer. These are ways to inject ideas while not saying them. Well, I don't want to call him complainer in chief. Are we going to call Carney the lying prime minister? I don't want to say he's the corrupt prime minister ripping off taxpayers. You don't see them saying that on here.
Prime minister in waiting is something completely different. Does this ad help him move into that space?
Well, the one that you played, I think, does. It's inspirational, but there's no question there's a bit of implicit things are tough and sort of, I'm sure, hoping people will draw the conclusion on who they should blame. I think the second one that you described, I don't know that will work very well. And my only reason for that is affordability is a big issue. I think that part will resonate, but where the Conservatives clearly want that ad to go is that people start to say it's the Liberal Party, it's the Liberal government. I think people, whether this is right or wrong, I think it's clear. People have sort of given the Carney government a whole new slate. They've told themselves, yeah, that was all Trudeau. We're going to give this guy and this sort of new administration a chance and see what they do. So I just don't know using 2015 as the benchmark will really hit Carney as hard as they want. To your point, though, Mike, I think it is a tough balancing act. A few people on this panel have been leaders of the opposition. It's tough to keep the government to account and also try to show that you're ready for the top job. So that is a balancing act for anyone. But there's no question that when Trudeau was in power, Poilievre was focused on the first part, the accountability, and really giving it to the government. And he was very successful. So now he needs to pivot. So I think that first ad will help him do that a bit.
What I worry about is what he mentioned there. Will Canadians just think, oh, well, Carney is new and it's not really him, and that's why we're seeing him do so well in the polls? Canadians don't know that he's ripping us off and getting rich with his Brookfield deals and just think, okay, give him a majority government and then he'll fix everything. When in reality, it's going to get worse, much worse. Then Canadians will start to shrug their shoulders and go, what's going on? We gave Carney power. Isn't he supposed to fix it?
That second one, Tom, though, does try and tie it all together, saying 11 years of Liberal government. And trying to help people understand where they are right now and trying to lay that at the feet of the Liberals. Do you think that, as Brian said, people have wiped the slate clean, or is it helping connect those dots?
No, it definitely helps connect the dots. And the top line for me is the fact that the Conservative Party that sits on top of satchels full of cash has finally decided to start spending some of it to help the image of their leader. And it's high time. I mean, Poilievre has been working his tail off. You know, he's been traveling. We talk about this show or that show or New York, but in the speeches in Toronto to the Economic Club, the New York one, major speeches, those are helpful. And extracts from that can be used to enhance the public's perception of him. He's always been the nattering kind. He's always been the smart aleck. He's always wanted to have the last word. But now he's trying to appear more prime ministerial, and I think he's pulling it off. The second ad, by the way, I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who have looked at it from the conservative side and said it's a good idea. My instinct is we're not in a college class here with somebody using a PowerPoint to try to point to this year and this subject. When you start moving through all that text and all that information, what are you left with? Talk about the cost of bacon. Give something concrete. Yeah. By the way, the best political ad, as far as I'm concerned, the last few years was the time that Poilievre had a fake ad where he was sitting down with Trudeau and explaining to Trudeau the cost of the brunch that they were about to have together. That's brilliant because everybody can connect with that. I think that that's a bit too remote, the idea of putting all those facts and figures out there, but tying the Liberals, going back to 2015, saying, since they arrived, this has been out of control and we're worse than other countries in the G7. Smart politics. Is it going to help Poilievre? I'll go to halfway to what Brian was saying. I think that Poilievre, you know the old story, you don't get a second chance to make a good first impression. The first impression that people have of Poilievre is not very positive. They like Carney. And I think that Poilievre's still got a tough road to hoe to try to convince Canadians that he's their guy.
And that's the problem with first impressions, is the media is telling people what the first impression was supposed to be. Poilievre is this bulldog, he's aggressive, and just paint him as this guy that people shouldn't vote for. The media did that. They spend $1 million a day on CBC slandering Pierre Poilievre. So undoing that work is a lot of work for him. He has to go on Joe Rogan, and you see there's a lot of comments saying, oh, I can't believe I didn't vote for this guy. And, you know, I looked at the media and they told me he was a bad guy, but now I'm going to vote for him next time. It takes a lot of work to undo that. And that's the problem with this propaganda machine here. It's like North Korea in this country.
And it's interesting, Robbie, he may have that extra time. We're going to talk about this in our next segment when you consider that if the Liberals do manage to get 2 out of the 3 seats coming up in those by-elections, well, then they'll have a majority. So you may have more time to redefine yourself. Do you think that he's succeeding at all, and especially in these podcast appearances, and kind of softening the edges of what we've seen from Pierre Poilievre, you know, as Tom sort of described, as we know him in the House of Commons?
I think he has, Mike, with the public. I think the podcast appearances have been largely successful for Mr. Poilievre, but I think Mr. Poilievre has some big problems internally. I don't want to sound like a gloomy Gus here, but it's easy to say that if the Liberals have a majority, that Mr. Poilievre has lots more time. I'm not sure I believe that, because remember, the Conservatives have the Reform Act. Only 20% of them of MPs have to say that they want a leadership review, and they can get rid of the leader. That's 40-something MPs.
It's interesting how the Conservatives are the only one who can get rid of the leader, and the Liberals voted against that, allowing Mark Carney to have his reign of terror, and the NDP and even the Green Party. This should be something that should be a staple across all parties, and they can't change it. Every party can vote their leader out. There should be some sort of standardized rule across all the parties.
My colleague Althea Raj in our Ottawa bureau had an interesting story about how emails were sent to all of Poilievre's shadow cabinet from his office, basically asking them to justify their existences, show their social media posts, show what interviews they've done. Basically keeping them on their toes. There's nothing wrong with that when you're doing really well in the polls. I think that when you're doing well in the polls, you can get away with that stuff. When you're a drag on your ticket, and Mr. Poilievre is, I spoke to some Tories last week who say he's a 15% percentage point drag on them, and they're worried about losing their seats. So when MPs start worrying about losing their seats because of the leader, that's when the leader is in jeopardy. And it doesn't matter. You can have the greatest ads in the world, Mike, but if the folks around you are out to get you, you're a goner. And Mr. Poilievre knows this because he helped defenestrate the last leader, Aaron O'Toole. So he knows what could happen, and I think he's probably aware of that.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Aaron O'Toole is basically a Liberal. This is the problem we have right now, is the Liberals are trying to just get a bigger majority without going to an election, and now they're using these fear tactics to try to bring people over. They're running $1 million a day to keep attacking Pierre Poilievre. They never hold Carney to account for any of his stuff because, well, I go through it every single day, and I'm the one reporting it, as well as other creators. Very rarely are any of these pundits, especially on CBC, critical of Carney. That's why when they are, it's big news. You know, we have Robert Fife actually criticize Mark Carney, that kind of stuff. If the Conservatives were to get a new leader tomorrow, the first thing the CBC would do is start attacking that new person. That's just what they would do, because that's what Mark Carney would demand they do if they want to get that big $1.6 billion every single year. It's like North Korea in this country.